Thank you for watching the video. Through the story, I invite you to a place of peace and gentle sleep. Please relax and take your time to drift off into a restful slumber.
The Hidden Truth. Kajimaru stood at the edge of the dark forest, the tall trees looming above him like silent sentinels. The faint glow of the moon filtered through the thick canopy, casting eerie shadows across the forest floor. His breath was steady, his mind sharp. He had escaped the castle, but his mission was far from over. In fact, it had only grown more dangerous. He held the scroll in his hand, its weight a constant reminder of the importance of his task. Somewhere in this forest was the hidden temple, an ancient place where the secrets of the scroll would be revealed. The path ahead was treacherous, filled with traps and dangers designed to keep intruders at bay. But Kajimaru was no ordinary intruder. He was a shadow warrior, trained to navigate the most perilous of terrains. As he stepped deeper into the forest, the sounds of the night grew louder, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft whisper of the wind through the branches. But there was something else, too. A presence. He could feel it, lurking just beyond his sight. Someone was following him. His hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword, his senses on high alert. Whoever it was, they were skilled. He had not seen or heard them, but he knew they were there, waiting for the right moment to strike. Kajimaru continued walking, his steps silent, his eyes scanning the darkness around him. If his pursuer wanted a confrontation, he would be ready. Suddenly, there was a faint sound, a soft rustle of leaves behind him. Kajimaru spun around, drawing his sword in one fluid motion. For a moment, there was nothing but the stillness of the forest. Then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged. It was the same person who had attacked him in the castle. The dark cloak, the hood, the cold gleam of a blade in their hand, it was unmistakable. But now, in the open air of the forest, Kajimaru could sense something different. This person was not just an enemy, they were a guardian of the scroll, sworn to protect its secrets at all costs. "You're persistent," Kajimaru said, his voice low and calm. The figure remained silent, their face hidden in the shadows of their hood. But Kajimaru could see the tension in their stance, the way they held their weapon with practiced precision. "I don't want to fight you," Kajimaru continued. "But if you stand in my way, I will." The figure finally spoke, their voice cold and emotionless. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. That scroll holds more than you can comprehend. If you unlock its secrets, it will be the end of everything." Kajimaru's grip tightened on his sword. Then why protect it? Why guard something so dangerous? "Because some things are meant to remain hidden," the figure replied. "The knowledge in that scroll could destroy entire kingdoms. You think you're on a noble mission, but you're only playing into the hands of those who seek power at any cost." Kajimaru's eyes narrowed. The words struck a chord, but he couldn't let doubt creep in. His mission was clear: retrieve the scroll and deliver it to his master. Nothing else mattered. "I will not let you stop me," Kajimaru said, his voice firm. The figure sighed softly. "So be it." In an instant, they attacked. Their movements were swift and precise, their blades slicing through the air with deadly intent. Kajimaru met the attack head-on, his sword clashing with theirs in a flurry of sparks. The sound of steel against steel echoed through the forest as the two warriors fought under the moonlit sky. Kajimaru's opponent was faster than anyone he had faced before. But Kajimaru had the advantage of experience, and his training had prepared him for battles like this. He parried each strike with skillful precision, his mind focused, his body moving with the fluid grace of a seasoned warrior. The fight continued for what felt like hours, the two combatants locked in a deadly dance of blades. Every strike, every parry was calculated, neither willing to give an inch. But Kajimaru could sense his opponent weakening. Their attacks were growing slower, their movements less fluid. Finally, with a swift, decisive strike, Kajimaru knocked the figure's blade from their hand. The weapon clattered to the ground, and the figure stumbled back, gasping for breath. "It's over," Kajimaru said, lowering his sword but keeping his guard up. The figure slowly removed their hood, revealing a young woman with sharp, determined eyes. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but there was a fierceness in her expression that told Kajimaru she was not yet defeated. "You think you've won," she said, her voice laced with defiance. "But the real battle hasn't even begun." Kajimaru stared at her, his mind racing. This woman, this guardian of the scroll, knew more than she was letting on. She wasn't just protecting the scroll, she was protecting something far greater. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice steady. The woman smirked. "You'll find out soon enough. But by then, it will be too late." Before Kajimaru could react, she reached into her cloak and pulled out a small, intricately carved whistle. She blew into it, and the sound that followed was not what Kajimaru had expected. It was a low, haunting note that seemed to vibrate through the air, sending a chill down his spine. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The trees around them shook violently, and from the shadows emerged a group of masked warriors, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They moved silently, their movements precise and coordinated as they surrounded Kajimaru and the woman. "These are the true guardians of the scroll," the woman said, her voice filled with both pride and sorrow. "They will ensure that its secrets remain hidden." Kajimaru's heart raced as he scanned the group. These warriors were unlike any he had ever seen. Their movements were too smooth, too synchronized, as if they were controlled by some unseen force. "Leave now," the woman said, her voice softer. "This is your only chance. If you stay, you will die." Kajimaru hesitated. The odds were against him, and the woman's warning was clear. But his mission, he couldn't just abandon it. He looked at the woman, then at the masked warriors surrounding him. His mind raced as he weighed his options. But deep down, he knew there was only one choice. Without a word, Kajimaru sheathed his sword and turned to leave. The woman watched him go, her expression unreadable. As he disappeared into the shadows of the forest, she sighed softly. "The shadow warrior is strong," she whispered to herself. "But even he cannot stop what is to come." And with that, she turned to face the masked warriors, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. The final choice. Kajimaru's heart pounded in his chest as he made his way deeper into the dense forest, the haunting sound of the whistle still echoing in his mind. The masked warriors had not followed him, but the woman's ominous words weighed heavily on his thoughts. The real battle hasn't even begun. What did she mean by that? And who were these masked warriors she had summoned? He had faced countless enemies in his time, but this was different. The forest around him was eerily silent now. The rustle of leaves that had accompanied his steps earlier had faded into nothingness. It was as if the very world had stopped breathing, waiting for something. As he moved forward, he could sense the eyes of the forest upon him, the weight of unseen forces closing in around him. Ahead, the glow of torchlight flickered through the trees, casting long, trembling shadows. Kajimaru quickened his pace, sensing he was nearing the hidden temple, the place where the secrets of the scroll were meant to be revealed. But the closer he got, the more the air seemed to thicken, as if the very ground was holding its breath. Reaching the clearing, Kajimaru found himself standing before an ancient stone structure, half shrouded in the darkness of the forest. The temple was old, its withered stones were covered in moss, the inscriptions on them long since faded. There was a sense of both reverence and foreboding about the place. The temple's entrance was guarded by large stone statues, their eyes carved in a way that seemed to follow his every move. These guardians of stone seemed almost alive in the flickering light. Taking a deep breath, Kajimaru stepped forward, entering the temple's shadowed interior. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of ancient wood and damp earth. His footsteps echoed through the cavernous space, and the only light was the faint glow of the moon that seeped through the cracks in the walls. The temple was still, silent, save for the occasional drip of water from somewhere deeper within. As he ventured further, Kajimaru's fingers instinctively curled around the scroll that hung from his belt. The time had come to unlock its secrets, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for him. Something more than just the scroll. The Guardian's warning echoed in his mind, "You'll find out soon enough." But by then, it would be too late. At the heart of the temple, there was a small altar on which sat a stone pedestal. The pedestal was unadorned, but atop it lay an ancient scroll, bound in worn leather. It glowed faintly in the moonlight, as though it held a power of its own. The markings on the scroll were intricate, beautiful, and mysterious, impossible to decipher without the right knowledge. Kajimaru took a hesitant step forward. His fingers twitched, aching to reach for the scroll. But something in the air shifted. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble ever so slightly, and the temple's walls groaned as though it was waking from a long slumber. Suddenly, there was a noise, a low, rumbling growl that echoed from the shadows. Kajimaru spun around, his hand going instinctively to his sword. He could feel it, the presence of something watching him, waiting. The air grew heavier, colder, and with every passing second, the growl grew louder. It wasn't a creature, he realized. It was something more ancient, something that had been sealed away long ago. The ground cracked open before him, and from the darkness, figures began to emerge, hooded, robed figures, their faces hidden beneath their hoods, their bodies moving with a grace that was unnatural. These were no ordinary warriors. They moved with a supernatural silence, their movements almost as if they were part of the very shadows themselves. The figures circled around Kajimaru, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. He felt their gaze on him, their silent judgment weighing on his soul. They were not enemies, at least not in the way he was used to. These were the true guardians of the scroll, protectors of something far greater than the knowledge within its ancient parchment. One of the figures stepped forward, the leader, if there was such a thing. The robes it wore were darker than the rest, and its face remained shrouded in shadow. Its voice, when it spoke, was deep and otherworldly. "Do you truly believe that you can control what is hidden within this scroll?" the figure asked, its tone filled with contempt. Kajimaru gripped his sword tighter, but he didn't draw it. He knew this was different. These weren't ordinary foes, and their fight wouldn't be fought with steel alone. "I seek only the truth," he said, his voice calm and steady. "The scroll must be brought back to my master." The figure shook its head slowly, as though pitying him. "You cannot comprehend the truth, warrior. The truth that lies within the scroll will not set you free. It will bind you to forces beyond your control." Kajimaru's heart raced. He had faced countless battles, but this felt different. These guardians, these protectors, they were not here to fight him in the way he expected. They were here to protect something much larger, something that had been hidden for centuries. "You are but a shadow," the figure continued. "The scroll will use you as it has used many before. You will fall, just as they did." Kajimaru's resolve hardened. The whispers of his master, the distant echoes of his training, filled his mind. This mission had always been larger than himself. He had always known that the road would not be easy, but this was more than just a physical battle. It was a test of his very spirit. "Then I will face it," Kajimaru said, his voice resolute. "I will face whatever darkness lies within this scroll, and I will not allow it to control me." The figure's laugh was low and chilling. "Very well, warrior. You will face the truth, and you will discover just how far you are willing to go." The guardians began to close in on him, their forms becoming more and more solid, their presence overwhelming. But Kajimaru stood tall, his eyes focused on the scroll. He would not falter. Not now. This was the moment he had been preparing for his entire life. With one last look at the scroll, he stepped forward, ready to unlock the secrets within. The guardians watched, their eyes filled with ancient knowledge and sorrow. As he touched the scroll, the ground beneath him began to tremble violently, and the temple shook. The air itself seemed to distort, as though time and space were bending around him. And then, in an instant, everything went dark.